Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge, or in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people.
Which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara Riska, life coach, wife, and the mother of 4 incredible and unique kids. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I completely lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and grace that once felt so completely lacking. I started the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves up against what feels impossible. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle the dreams that you hold impossible now. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you're a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello, and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. We are in episode number 42. We have a guest interview this episode. I loved the conversation with Annie. I know you will too. As I was listening to this episode, as I was editing, I had a really fun idea to do a giveaway. So I'm going to tease it now, and I'll give you all the details in the end because I don't want to blow the surprise. But as you listen to the episode, my guess is you will come up with what I'm doing as a giveaway. It's just fun. It's a fun way of connecting with you guys and, encouraging you guys to take into action the content from the episode. So let's get into the episode. Let me tell you a little bit about Annie. Anne Fricke first came to the Redwood Forest and her dramatic coastline of Northern California after growing up in Southern Indiana. She knew it was her home. Her writing takes on many forms and genres: poetry, short stories, novels, blog posts, and even dabbles in fantasy most nights at her children's bedside. I would love to watch that. She performs with a local group, A Reason to Listen to Poetry Collective, in a tavern whose interior warms her like a comforting drink after a long day of travel. She's a mother, she's a wife, a traveler, storyteller, and an inspiring campfire musician. Welcome, Annie. Well, tell us a little bit more about yourself. I would love to hear you describe a little bit more about your life in your own words, and especially how you identify as a special needs mom.
Yeah. Okay. So I am a poet and a writer. I do performance poetry and, well, before COVID, I was doing performance poetry. It's been a little while now. It's not quite the same over Zoom, but so yeah, I do a lot of writing. I'm a ghostwriter. I've written a novel and I'm getting ready to start on my second one. And um, so that's kind of what I do outside of the special needs community. And my middle daughter has Prader-Willi syndrome. She's 9 years old, and she's the one that brought me into the special needs community. And shortly after her diagnosis, I started a blog as a way to process our experiences, but also as a way to put the information out there because it's not a very well-known syndrome. So I wanted like friends and family to have a place that they could, find out what was going on in our lives, what more about this disorder, but without me having to tell each and every single one of them. And then for a few years, I was doing a podcast with somebody else. And then in the beginning of 2018, I started the Walking with Freya podcast. And that was kind of along the same lines of the blog, but just realizing like maybe things were shifting more towards podcasting than blogging. And really, I just wanted to be able to share the experiences and share our story, partly because that's just kind of the person that I am. I'm a very open person. I really like to tell my story. I like to hear other people's stories. That's how I really connect. And also as a way to like educate the community. So yeah, I don't know if people know what Prader-Willi syndrome is, but it is a rare genetic disorder that manifests in a variety of ways. But the big thing is that, when the babies are born, they have low muscle tone and failure to thrive. And then, at some point as they get older, it kind of like does a 180 and shifts. And, they get this obsession with food. They have this appetite they can't quite quench. So that's a big factor in the disorder. And also there's some behavior issues and learning disorders that can come along with that. So, in the beginning, when you get a diagnosis it can be really overwhelming, something like that. So, writing about it and talking about it was really helpful for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. When you received this diagnosis, did you have any idea that a diagnosis like this existed out there in the world?
No, I had never heard about it. And there was one appointment we had with our pediatrician. Freya was like 3 months old. And he said, okay, I think it's time to do genetic testing. And my husband and I were very naive. And we said, oh, well, if it's genetic, then, why even bother testing? Because, there's nothing we can do about it. And part of
Uh-huh.
that was because, the testing was to go down to San Francisco, which was like 6 hours south. So we were like, well, I don't know why we've done a lot of traveling, but for some reason we were like, well, that's a long way to go to find out that there's nothing that we can do is how we kind of thought about it. And the doctor said, well, actually, there's a lot that you can do. And then he started talking about early intervention, and Prader-Willi syndrome was the example that he used.
Oh, no
And
way.
yeah, well, I realized now he knew.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah, he knew, but he didn't want to, he was very old school. He was like almost retiring. And his view was kind of like, I think he knew from the beginning, or I
Mhm.
think he at least suspected it. But he wanted us to have like this time with her without a diagnosis. And part of me is very grateful for that. But the other part of me is like, it could have saved a lot of worrying and
Huh.
fretting. So I don't know. I go back and forth on that on that experience. But
Yeah, that's
yeah,
really
so
interesting. It's like like when I first heard that, I was like, that's really beautiful that he wanted to give you that gift.
mhm.
But then it was almost like it also, I didn't look at the other side of it that you were like, I would have saved me a lot of worrying and wondering.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Well, and maybe, yeah, because I think it was really because yes, once you get the diagnosis, then your mind shifts and then you go into this, you have all these examples you can look up on the internet, and all these stories, and then this like these characteristics, and then it's all kind of laid out. So it was actually really nice to not have that right away. But I could have gone with a little more reassurance that she was okay. There was a brief period of time, there was a couple weeks there in the beginning where she was so quiet and so lethargic and so unresponsive to a lot of things that I was afraid she was dying. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
it was, and sometimes she would fall asleep. And I mean, I wore her, bare against my chest for 2 weeks. Just walking, just hanging out in the house. And there were times where she would sleep so heavily and I wouldn't be able to wake her up. And I would have to like, really kind of jostle her and call to her. And it was just this kind of traumatic experience. So, like that happened.
Yeah.
So maybe if I had known, if somebody had been able to reassure me that she was going to be okay, that would have been nice too. Well, I didn't need to have those experiences, but yes, it was also like, because once we got the diagnosis, then it's, then you have, in some ways, you have this like, well, okay, this is, kind of the trajectory of my child now, but also you have um, ways to handle it. You understand more, and then you get into this thing of like, okay, here's what we can do. This is what early intervention looks like for this type of situation, and you can be proactive, and that's great too. So, there's advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, I could totally see both sides. I was thinking when you were talking a little bit earlier, it would be fun to do an episode on all the naive thoughts that we remember thinking in the early days of diagnoses. Like your thought about the genetic test and like, oh, well, why would we do that? Like, you look back now and you're like, that's hilarious. But
So
it also
dumb.
shows you um our society is really not very well versed in, like, if you're not in the special needs community, it's almost like a place you would just never go unless you had to go. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that for us, once we had our diagnosis and we're well on our journey, we were in recovery and going to, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in California, there's services called California Children's Services, where many children, most often have cerebral palsy, receive OT, PT, and other services through, like, they're on school campuses, but it's through a state supported organization. Have you heard of CCS?
Yes, yeah, I believe she had CCS for a little bit.
I would say, like, I could see it being likely. However, anyhow, Levi, through his diagnosis, gets services through CCS. And as soon as we started going there, I know that my eyes started to be open to be like, oh my gosh, there's this whole other world that I didn't even know existed. All these kids. So it's like, this is like a conglomeration of kids that are not like the others, that are born with differences. And like here, there's a plethora of all these people. Whereas like in our normal day-to-day life, it's almost like I didn't even know they existed, which is weird. But then also I see why, but I think it is something that I would like to change in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of inclusion and all of us, learning about each other. And my daughter is mainstreamed at a Waldorf school at the moment. And we just did a talk for her class on PWS.
How did it
And
go?
it went great. It went great. I mean, of course, I was really nervous, and I sent out an email to the parents beforehand, and I got some great feedback from the parents. But in the letter, in the email, I talked about how, where I was raised in the middle of the country, the kids that were in special education literally rode a short bus to school, and those were the jokes.
Yeah,
As
I remember these jokes.
yeah, as
Yep.
awful as that is. And then they were, kind of carted off to these classrooms at the end of hallways, and we never saw them. And if we did see them, they were just like, they were in their own little cluster during
Mhm.
pep rallies or whatever. There was never any interaction that, and I've spoken with so many people that are like, yeah, that's how it was for me. And
Same.
it's so sad. That's heartbreaking. And I don't want to live in that world. And I don't want my daughter to grow up in that. I don't want any of my daughters to grow up in that world. So that's one of the things that I realized with doing the podcast is also this, like, it is geared it's a place for parents of kids with special needs to have a voice, but I hope that everybody listens. I want everybody to listen to these stories, and I want everybody to be educated and to understand more. And so, it was really terrifying in a way for me, more so I think than my daughter, to talk to her class because, I remember what it was like when I was a kid and the jokes and all the stupid stuff. But like, I don't know. I don't know if it's just where we live or what, but like kids are just so accepting. And, and if you just come in there from the start and like, this is who I am and this is how I am. And it's like they want to be accepting and open, and we should nurture that.
I agree. And actually, I'm especially interested in this right now because over this last weekend, my son, my special needs son, and I spent some moments preparing a slideshow presentation so that he can basically present himself to his classroom. He's super excited about it. He happens to have a very outgoing personality and loves sharing about himself, which I love about him.
Mm-hmm.
And so we put together this presentation. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is going to be so helpful. I think the kids are going to really appreciate knowing all this about him because he does have some behaviors that are really hard to be with and can be scary for other people to be with.
Mm-hmm.
And they can be, injurious. But then it was interesting how my husband was talking about it, like kind of putting out the idea that some kids like might get this information and actually be mean about it. And it just the thought hadn't even occurred to me. I was living like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so amazing. People are going to know him and they're going to love him and they're going to give him space in the halls if they see him upset, and they're going to not bump into him because he's partially blind, and they're going to all these things. And I don't know how it's going to go. I do still have high hopes, but I want to ask you about, so you said, were the parents involved in the presentation? Or was it just to the students?
I sent an email to the parents with some of the information, and the presentation was just during their class time over Zoom. So it was just for the kids, but I did hear from a couple parents that they were listening.
Yeah. Well, and the reason, and so I'm all like, it's funny. I'm asking because I really want to know what I'm going to do, but I actually think the conversation obviously serves everybody here. So we're having this publicly, but okay. So when you were talking, I'm thinking, you mentioned email the parents. I was like, oh, that's a good idea. Because it made me realize that I have more confidence that the kids are going to be loving and accepting to my son. But it's really the parents that I'm a little bit more concerned about, because I have heard comments about the parents thinking that children like ours take away from the opportunity that their kid has in school, that they can be a distraction, or in our case, Levi has stolen items like lunches from other students. And so it's like, I know that parents are hearing things about what happens as a result of my son being part of the community. And I feel like I'm wondering if I can actually have this presentation emailed to the parents of the class and say, hey, this is who Levi is. Like, please help your student understand him. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, my intention was to let the parents know, excuse me, that we were going to be talking about this, and to see if their kids had any questions, if they had talked about it, but also to really kind of reach out to them on that level of like, look, this is kind of scary for me too to talk about this. And, because we're all of the age where we remember being children and how it went. And so, just really trying to, kind of connect with them personally. I totally understand the fear. And, that is a fear that I have when like they ask for a play date. If a kid asks for a play date, it's like, well, okay, how much information do I divulge so that Frey is safe, but also like not so much that it scares them away. Like I don't want, I don't want anybody to be like, oh, that seems like too much for me. I don't know. So it has this balance. I don't know. And, unfortunately, it's not going to reach everybody. Not everybody is going to agree. And hopefully they just won't say anything. The parents that reached out to me were the parents that were like, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I didn't hear from all the parents, so I don't know. Like, I'm sure some of them were like, oh God, and I'm sure they have their own
Yeah.
opinion, probably very similar opinions to what you get. Like, well, what does this mean for my kid in the classroom? And I I feel like I probably would have maybe said the same thing before I found myself in this position.
Yeah. I feel like I might have too. I think that, and even as I advocate for my son, for instance, he's really worried about having to do laps around the school for like they don't do PE at our kids or at their school. They do some just active stuff. It's a charter school. I don't know what they're doing, but
Yeah.
we love their school. So I anyhow, but he's really worried about it. And so it's like, for me, it's like I'm advocating that there's a fully inclusive alternative activity than walking around the entire school. Because I know you don't know that much about my son, but he has a physical disability. And so he can walk, but he won't be able to keep up with his peers at a typical walking pace, nor would it be an enjoyable experience for him. Like, I mean, we just take walking for granted. It's like, go walk
Right.
outside. It's like, you never think about walking. For him, it's like, how can I get out of this? I don't want to do this. And so definitely it's a parenting challenge to know how far to push him and how to support him. But anyhow, so as I think about advocating for field trips and saying, hey, like, he can't walk that far, so we need to figure out alternative. It's like asking people to change or modify what they're doing because of his abilities or their disabilities. It's hard for me to ask people not to do things because I don't yet have an alternative suggestion of like how we can have this be fully inclusive. So therefore, I'm asking you not to do a walking field trip that he can't go on. I don't know. Like, I obviously am thinking about a lot of new things as we're in different grades. But
How old's your son?
He's 11 going on 12. He's in 6th grade.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Freya, I mean, she walks well, but she doesn't have the stamina or the pace of her peers. And she also goes to a charter school. It's a Waldorf school. And they did nature walks for the first couple years. And I thankfully was in a position that I could go with her, and I would always be pulling up the rear with Freya. She was always the slowest walker. She would always get tired. I sometimes I had to carry her back, which was fine when she was younger.
Yeah.
And we're just
my son's 180 pounds. There's no carrying anymore.
We're not doing that. Well, so I think, and this is where maybe it gets hard because we have our mindset and we know, like, well, I'm going to speak for myself, like I have this mindset that I was raised with. I was, in this, I'm born and raised in this culture, so I have compassion for that mindset. And so I have to of like, well, I can do this, so I should be able to do that, even if you can't, kind of thing. But, so it's like,
that's exactly what I was trying to that's exactly what I was trying to explain. You did it much better. Thank you.
Well, yeah, of course. So I think one of the challenges, even for ourselves, is to accept that, like, or to envision this, that it's not that you're asking somebody to not do something, but that it's like, okay, what can we create together that we can all participate in? There are so many things we can do other than, walk 2 miles. There are so many other creative things that we can do. And so how can we, so we have to give ourselves permission. I kind of hate that phrase because it seems cliche, but it is true. Like, give ourselves permission to envision this world that we're not asking people to not do things. We're asking them to be more creative. How can we all be more creative so that we can all be included? And really, we're all going to benefit from that. I mean, that's what it comes down to is, most of us don't feel good that we were raised in a school where, the kids in special education were carted off down a dark hallway. We never saw them. Like, that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel like what humanity is about. It feels good to include everybody. And I think most people in general want to do that. We haven't been shown how, really. And so we have to get creative.
I think you said everything that I've been thinking and processing really so well. And I really appreciate your way with words. And I think that it does come down to creativity. And I think that's ultimately what I always go back to. And I think then what I realize is that our jobs as parents of these children is inspiring those around us to join in that creative conversation, because it can't just be us doing the work alone. We actually have to inspire people that don't have to be in our shoe, or that aren't in our shoes, and don't have to come to the places that we go. It's inspiring them of like, why would they want to come, and how can they help be part of the creative conversation of how this can include everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if we get everybody thinking about it, somebody's going to have a good idea.
Exactly.
Very likely it's not going to be us because we're overwhelmed with other things and, spending hours on the phone with insurance companies and
I think
things
that's
like
the
that.
thing is like, I think it's like, I'm recognizing this, like I'm putting all the burden of creativity on my shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think inviting other people to the conversation of how can we all be creative in this, that's really where we get to then be together. Even in the conversation around inclusion, we're together versus us going to do the
Yes.
work on our own and then kind of pushing it out on our own. It's actually bringing people into the conversation and inviting them in versus trying to kind of defend against, what we perceive as the people against us.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because just feeding more into that, like that divisiveness, us versus
Yes.
them. And so maybe rather than coming to them and saying, feeling like you have to have the perfect alternative, like my son has a hard time on these walks. So let's do something else. Like you can just come to the group and say, here are the challenges. And sounds like what you're going to do. You're going to do this talk. Here are the challenges. My son would love to participate in this thing with this class. And what are ways that we can, what are your ideas? Like, how can we make this fun for your kids as well without, setting this goal that is, or whatever, this activity that is challenging. There's so many other things to do.
Yes, so many others. And even for this one, we're like, instead of walking around the whole school, I'm like, okay, let's walk around a smaller area so that, well, maybe he can't keep up with everybody. At least he's in the same vicinity with everybody and he's not like left behind. And so I'm like, we did it. Like, so yay, day one, we figured this one out. But I think what I'm realizing is through this conversation, which is nowhere where I thought we would go in this conversation, but it's usually how my podcasts go, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just really recognizing, like, I feel like what I'm really taking from this is inviting other people to the conversation and not putting the whole burden of this on my own shoulders. Like you said, I have to go make like 5 calls on getting more appointments. And so I need help in that area. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, these conversations work both ways, I'm definitely learning as well and kind of solidifying some things, I guess. So May is PWS Awareness Month. So I have a few ideas.
It's Brain Cancer Awareness Month too. Isn't that fun?
Oh, nice. Cool. All right. Well, that's good to know. Yeah. So for PWS Awareness Month, Freya's class is going to do like a fitness challenge. And they're going to like set their own goals. Everybody's going to set their own goals. And I'm going to try and get, they're going to get sponsorship. But, like I was telling the teacher, like, I don't want to have like an award for like who could do the most, because the point is that just to inspire like fitness and more active lifestyle, which is one of the things that we need to manage PWS. And, I said, so it just doesn't seem right that we would,
yes, award the like strongest person.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably been the strongest person. Yes.
Right. But so it's just like something like that. Like this is, I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. And I think that it'll be a fun way to get everybody involved and to be supportive of Freya. She's no way going to be doing the push-ups and sit-ups that they're going to be doing, but they're all going to have kind of this group goal. And I think it'll be fun. I'm excited.
It sounds amazing, and it makes me realize, maybe I should consider doing a little campaign around May. But we'll table that for another conversation. I want to hear a little bit more about you as a writer. It's apparent from just how you show up in the world, that you believe that storytelling and telling stories is really a valuable thing. I would love to hear why you believe that telling stories is so important to us, specifically as moms of special needs children.
Yeah, well, that's kind of two parts because there is the part of which is what, is kind of happening with us. Like, as you tell your story, you start to see things that maybe you hadn't caught on to yet. Whether you're writing in a journal or you're telling your story, when you tell your story, you're getting to process it. And so you're learning more things about you. I feel like every time you tell a story, like you learn a little more about yourself. And you're also, like informing your peers and your companions about you and letting them understand a little bit more about who you are. And I think, especially as moms of kids with special needs, it can be a very isolating experience. And I think that, so it's important to tell our story because we make our connections that way. We process our experiences, we understand more, we see things in a new way as we tell our story. And I think that, I know for me, one of my things is that I've always been a very open, vocal person, and sometimes to my detriment, but
Me too. I have. Keep going. Yes.
So, but there have been so many times in my life that people have thanked me for being open because it has given them, whatever, permission or strength or inspiration to be open about their story. It made it feel okay for them to tell their story. And so, that I guess is another reason why I do the podcast, because, if I'm okay telling my story, then, hopefully that will show somebody else who maybe has felt very isolated and very alone and felt like, she couldn't talk about it. Hopefully that helps her or him or whoever, feel comfortable and feel more open to sharing their story. Because when we share our stories and we open ourselves up, then people, we bring people in, we let people know who we are. And then people, if they resonate with that, they want to come in and they want to be closer. And, and that's a good way to kind of weed out the people that are good for you, good in your, good companions for your life as well. Like if you put yourself out there, if you talk about your son and your experiences, and you have some parents that turn away, that are like, I'm not okay with this, or whatever their negative response may be. Now, okay, I'm not going to, I don't need to put any energy towards that person. But, I guarantee you'll have other people that are like, oh, wow, I didn't know, or, and have all these complimentary things to say about how brave you are and all that, stuff that we hear. But
whether we like it or not, but
yeah, right.
we can at least agree that it's coming from a kind
yes
place, right? There, it's coming from
with good intentions.
It's good intentions, exactly.
Yeah. And so, yeah. So it helps you find your people.
Yeah. And I've heard you say that writing it is a powerful medicine. And I have recently learned that you actually are doing, I think it's a workshop, right, about writing. And I'd love to hear just more about your belief and of how writing, you talked about a little bit, and I loved it, but can you go a little bit more into that, about why you believe that writing is for us?
Yeah, so I did a workshop through We Are Brave Together. I've done a local workshop as well, and I was planning on doing more, and then COVID hit, so that's kind of on hold. But I do have a journal that I spent a few years making, running it by my writing group and all that stuff. And it's a writing journal specifically for parents and caregivers of children with special needs. And it's called There's Joy to Be Found Here. And it's broken into sections of like diagnosis, peers, relationships, advocacy. And for each section, I've shared a part of my own writing, whether it's a poem or an essay or whatever. And then it's followed by a bunch of writing prompts for that topic. And I think that, like, I started that idea when I started doing the podcast, because in the beginning of the podcast, my first 4 episodes are me telling my story. And what I realized was that, on this journey, so much, like, we have to learn so much. in a very short amount of time. And so, like we get a hold of one thing and we figure out like how to handle that or how to deal with that, or we just start to, and then something else comes along and then we have to move on to the next thing and then the next thing and the next thing. And we never really have an opportunity to go back and process or really think about some of the experiences that we had. And so what happened for me was when I was telling my story in the podcast and going back to the beginning, going back to those first, that first year or two, I didn't realize how much grief I was still holding on to. And I didn't realize that until like, thought I was talking about one thing, that like one characteristic of PWS. And then it turned into my relationships with my friends at that time and their children and how that affected me in the moment. And, and then there were tears. And then it was just like, whoa,
Wow.
I had forgotten. I'd forgotten about all that. And it was such a painful part of my story, and I had pushed it down because I had to move on. I didn't have time to process it. So one of the things that I think writing really helps us with is it gets us to slow down. It gets us to focus on ourselves for a bit because we put so much into our children, and you, I mean, the science is out there on journaling, therapeutic journaling, and how it can really tap into some deeper emotions and all of that stuff. And so there's that. I mean, anybody can look that up. But for this journey specifically, I think so much gets shoved aside, so much gets forgotten about. I think one of the things that for me in going back and writing my story was realizing, like seeing some of the things that we had gone through that I kind of also had forgotten about, and being able to look back at that and say, wow, we did that. We made it through that. We got through that, and here we are today, and we're happy, and there's joy in our lives, and it's not this doom and gloom that we thought it was going to be. And so like to have that as a reminder when other obstacles come up, to be able to have that perspective, like, okay, no, we got this, we're going to get through this. So
yeah, that is so interesting. And I'm realizing that also I'm a different person now than I was when I was going through all the different phases of our journey. And I think that with who I am now, when I go back to that place of what I was experiencing in the moment, I'm able to have I have different eyes to look at it. I have different access to compassion. I have different areas that I'm grieving. And so I think that actually writing is like, it sounds like what you're suggesting. And I wholeheartedly agree that it's an invitation to go back and to re-experience some moments and to basically take meaning from it, both for healing, but also empowerment, okay, like look at what I already did. Like, I know it felt just as hard then when I was going through it, but since this feels really hard and I did that, it's building the belief that you can do it. It's vague, but I think it makes sense.
Absolutely.
For anybody. So one, is the journal that you have still available? Is that something we can link to?
Yes. Awesome. I have copies for sale there. You can get on Amazon, but it's really expensive on Amazon. I have copies. You can go to my website and get it for much cheaper.
It sounds spectacular. And so, but I would love to give people kind of your tips, if you have some, on what they can, if they want to, if they hear this and like, oh, okay, like if Kara wasn't convincing enough in other episodes, I'm convinced now. I want to write. What would you suggest to them as a easy way to start?
Wow, so many things. Okay. I mean, well, they say writing is a muscle, and it's hard. It's a hard thing to write, is what people keep pointing out to me. That, if you're not practiced at it, it is hard. And even writers have a hard time sometimes. But so the best thing is really just to find what works for you. Try a couple different things. For me, that's getting up early. I set my alarm for 5. Sometimes I don't get up till 5:30. And then it's quiet and I have a journal and a pen. For me, it's always, unless I'm writing for when I'm doing my journaling or my poetry, when it's like I got to really tap into my emotions, I always do pen to paper. And I think that the science behind that is actually suggestive. Like it's,
Likewise.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can, if you need to, you can write on a computer, but really the best thing is a journal and a pen. And sometimes, go out and buy a new journal and a fancy pen. Like sometimes that, like even little things like that get you inspired. Have your cup of coffee. Some people are better at a coffee shop, when it's a little noisier. But just, and so just know that maybe like the first time you do it, it might not come out that well. But if you can like pick a time every day or every other day, just kind of create this ritual so that like, okay, when I sit here, this is what I'm writing about. And what I do is I will start with, I have a page in my journal and I'm going to write until I complete the page. And maybe I don't know what I'm going to write about, but I'm not going to stop until I've filled a page. And there are different techniques for, just like set a timer. You could set a timer and get your pen writing. And don't stop. And like, even if you're just writing, I'm using my pen, I'm just like writing the same thing over. I don't know what to say.
I'm sitting in a chair. I am a woman.
You can start by that.
Yeah.
Just, describing the room around you. You don't have to sit down and like figure out some big question of life, because it's a matter of getting your pen moving, getting your thoughts going, getting that connection between your subconscious and your hand, get that moving, and things will start to come out. And I put a lot of quotes in the journal because for me, I get a lot out of quotes that other people have said. And so one of the things that I've suggested to people is you can go to Goodreads, the website,
I love
and
Goodreads.
there's a place where you can put in a theme to find quotes. And if you want to, if you have like a theme, like you could put in, grief or joy or, something big like that, or you could get a little more detailed and put that in, then just start reading some of the quotes. And those may even like trigger something that you want to say. So,
wow, these are really, really good tips. I love the one about going out and buying a fresh journal and pen. Like having something little like that, I think can be so effective. And what I love and what I encourage people, so I love that you had a lot of different ideas, yet you threw out like a plethora of little ideas to help somebody that wants to start writing or journaling, in this case, get started. And so what I want to encourage my listeners to do is to choose just one. Choose one of the things she said and implement it. And let us know how it goes. And by all means, I encourage you to go check out this journal. It sounds like it's a really amazing tool. And I want to wrap up our episode. And is there anything else that you'd like to share or say as we close this out?
Oh, so many things. I always have a lot to say. Just to, thank everybody for listening to the podcast and to not be afraid to reach out. And if it's just a one person, maybe it's somebody on social media that you've seen and you see their posts and you feel connected to their posts, like send them a message and say, hey, this is who I am. I see you. And, I've met some really amazing people that way. So, don't let yourself get so isolated because there are people out there that are part of your tribe. I promise.
Brilliant. I love that. And I love the way you said it specifically. Don't let yourself get so isolated because so many people think that it's being isolated is happening to them. Mm-hmm. And I really love the specific way that you said that. So we're going to wrap up this episode. Annie, I thank you so much for this conversation. I obviously benefited from it. I believe I needed it. It was the right time for me. And I just really appreciate you and what you're for in this world. And thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really fun to talk with you. And I got a lot out of this conversation too. This was great.
Thank you.
I'm feeling really inspired.
Just like I said in the beginning, how much did you love that conversation? Obviously, I needed the conversation. It was the right time for me. And even listening to it again was really, really wonderful for me. So I want to make sure you know that the link to the journal will be found in the show notes. It sounds amazing, doesn't it? And then the giveaway I'm doing. So I'm going to do a giveaway over on Instagram. So you will have to click the show notes and hop over to the Instagram page. If you're not there, join. If you're there, join and follow whatever directions I come up with. Basically, I'd love to send you a journal and pen. My favorite is a moleskin. It's like not quite the size of an 8.5 by 11. I actually just bought one yesterday. I have particular pen tastes because you don't want it to be bleeding through the page. My like normal favorite pens don't work. So anyhow, I'm going to send you my favorites. I'm going to encourage you to take this fun step in towards writing your story. I also want to put in a teaser for the storytelling workshop that I'm going to be hosting on July 31st. I'm going to come up with a better name for it. You guys, I'm a little slow on the names, but that's okay. We'll come up with something. But obviously, you heard from Annie the value received from yourself in processing your own story, in telling your story, in going back and observing your own story through your own eyes, and then sharing it and creating connections with other people. My favorite line, I think, of this episode was, "Don't let yourself be isolated." And so this workshop I'm creating is a easy opportunity for you not to let yourself be isolated, to have fun, to empower your own story, and of course, to connect with other moms. And we'll teach you the whole way through. We'll support you. It'll be fun. And if you're a little bit hesitant, perfect. I think when we're stepping out of our comfort zone and into something we desire, yet also it's new, it's going to be uncomfortable. And so if you feel a little uncomfortable or uncertain, those feelings are welcome here, and probably everybody else is feeling the same. And lastly, you've heard me talk about it before, but if you're new here or kind of listen to episodes here and there, I want to make sure you know about Being Mom Together. So this is the name I came up with for the group coaching program that I have. It's an ongoing program. Moms are in there and they're ready to meet you. And the concept here is that what one mom is working on is not altogether that different than what you want to work on. To become unstuck, to figure out how to organize, and most importantly, like to feel back in control of your life. I think so many special needs moms feel like the diagnosis happened to them. Pretty much nobody I know asked for it, although some of the adoptive moms knew and still said yes. And so we honor you, of course. But most of us didn't put our name on the list to have a child with special needs. And so this group coaching program teaches you how to process that information and come out the other side feeling joyful, feeling connected, feeling powerful again, and feeling totally in control of your life. It's a good feeling. And it's really fun to see the moms that are in the group already, to really have them start saying, "Oh my gosh, like I can't believe how far I've come." And it just lights me up, delights me, and fires me up to continue producing for you guys. And as you can tell, I've got a lot going on. I have a lot in store for you guys. So we will see you on the next episode. And don't forget to join the giveaway and, of course, to share the podcast with all your friends that might benefit. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.